Today we're going to be looking at some data and deciding what type of display would be best. It's really important to keep in mind that when you're choosing a display for data that you could have more than one option. When do I use a bar graph? Well, when you take a look at the data, if the data is divided into categories like favorite fruits, favorite colors, types of animals, then you would want to use a bar graph. When do I use a circle graph? Whenever you're comparing parts to the whole. Anytime you see percents, typically if you see something about taking a poll or if they're voting on something, like for example, how many students voted for candy in the picture there, or also anytime that there are surveys. When do I use a frequency table? A frequency table is used when you're comparing the number of values in intervals, kind of like a histogram, except this time, if it says table, then this is the one that you want to use. Remember, this is just a table, not a display. Examples for a frequency table would be a list of numbers that need to be organized, how many teachers taught between 30 to 35 years, because 30 to 35 years would be an interval, or keeping track of scores if you take a look at the picture. When do I use a histogram? Well, you use a histogram when you're displaying the data from intervals. Remember, this is not the table form, this is a display. Anytime you see the word interval and it's asking for a display, you should think histogram. When do I use a line graph? You use a line graph whenever you're showing a change over time. So examples would be like how much something changed in price over the years, or television show ratings over time. Anytime that it has to deal with time and how much something is changing, then you use a line graph. When do I use a Venn diagram? A Venn diagram is used whenever you're displaying relationships among data. For example, anytime there is overlapping data, like kids who take just math or just English, and then kids who take both math and English. Or another example would be if you have kids who like blue or red, or maybe both blue and red. Now go ahead and number your paper from 1 to 9. I'm going to give you 9 separate examples, and I'd like you to choose the best display. For each question, pause the video, pick the best display, and then play the video again to check each answer. Remember, sometimes there could be more than one good answer, so just do the best you can. Okay, here's number 1. The table shows the number of years of service of the longest serving justices on the Supreme Court. Go ahead and take a look at the table and see what type of display would be best. Okay, let's see if you're correct. Since the data is broken down into intervals, we would want to use a histogram. Here's number 2. The number of cars sold in the last year by color compared to the total. Go ahead and write down what you think it is. Since it says compared to the total, we would use a circle graph. Number 3. Out of 85 teens surveyed, 40 own a digital music player and 69 own a CD player. Of those students who own either kind of player, 31 own both devices. Go ahead and select a display. You should have selected Venn diagram since there's overlapping data. There's teens who own a digital music player and teens who own a CD player. Go ahead and look at this table and decide which type of display would be best. You should have chose histogram. Once again, the scores are broken down into intervals. Number 5, the ratings for the highest rated TV show is shown for each season. Select an appropriate display for this situation. You should have chose line graph. Since the data is broken down in time and shows change over time, that's when we use a line graph. Number 6, how many kids participate in marching band, jazz band, both, or neither? Write down your answer. You should have chosen Venn diagram, again because there's overlapping data. Number 7, Danielle took a survey of her classmates' preferences for desserts. Danielle's survey revealed that 46% of her classmates like pies, 32% like ice cream, 9% like cake, and 13% don't have a preference. Pause the video, write down your answer. And you should have chosen circle graph. This one, since it shows you that there are percentages, circle graph is the best choice. Number 8, the stock price of a company for the last 30 days. You should have chosen line graph, again because it's showing change over time. And lastly, number 9, the number of students who answered what their favorite color was organized into categories. This would be a bar graph because it's organized into categories. Good job.